Welcome. Here's the thing, healing isn't just learning how to calm your nervous system, it's actually learning how to live when you no longer have to organize your life around survival. I'm Gail, trauma informed yoga instructor, mindfulness meditation coach, and somatic educator. Please subscribe to this channel if you're here, like it, share it, and also sign up for notifications. I realized that I knew how to survive, but did I actually know how to live? That was a question I had to ask myself. I think there comes a point when you realize that you know how to survive, you know how to do this thing, you know how to take care of your life, you know how to take care of other people, you know how to get it done, basically, right? But when life gets quieter, maybe there's a quieter season in your life or something gets canceled, where something happens, you realize you don't really know what to do with yourself when you're not in survival mode. And sometimes you don't even realize that that's what it is. And that's a really interesting place to find yourself in because healing isn't just about getting out of survival. It's actually learning how to come home to yourself. It's actually learning yourself all over again. So for me, coming home to myself is being able to listen to myself again. And it's about learning the things that I like, the things that I don't like. I think I've come home to myself a few times in life, but most recently, I realized I was really doing that during the shutdown, during the pandemic. Prior to that, I was working about 40 miles away from my home, so I had a really long commute. I was also running a business, which meant basically me teaching and training. And I was doing several other things in life, volunteering in ways to serve my community. And so I feel like that time when everything was shut down, at least for me, I felt like the universe, God was sitting us down and saying, let's get our priorities straight. Let's regroup. At least that's how it felt for me. And even though it was a really terrible time in many, many ways, it was also a time for me of great reflection, getting to know me better, and getting to remember who I was and all the things I liked. I could focus on my needs, not everybody else's needs, not what does everybody else expect from me, but what do I need? And I guess I was in a pretty interesting situation, and everybody had their own situations going on, right? I'm sure we all learned a lot about ourselves during that time or about our relationships, but I was at the time living alone. And so those questions like, what do I need? What feels true to me? What gives me energy? What lights me up? What am I curious about? What kind of life do I actually really want to live? So, those were some of the questions that were coming up for me. And it was probably the beginning of a seed that was planted about moving. I wasn't at home a whole lot when I was doing all that running around. I would sometimes stay closer to work, and I was very blessed to have a situation where I could do that, but it meant that I was away from my home a lot. So I feel like when everything shut down, my house was like, let's play. Everything started breaking down. I had a situation where there was water, and I lived in a quad at the time, so I had two different um, people on sharing walls, right? Two different homes sharing walls, and I had water coming into my laundry room. And I went to the first place that I thought it was coming from, and the neighbor said, "Oh no, absolutely not. We're not having any issues." And so then that took me down this road of discovery and of trying to figure some things out, as well as trusting what I knew that I knew, right? Because ultimately, there were two sources of where the water was coming from. One was the initial neighbor, she lied. The other one was from a young couple that was renting, and they had never even opened the door to where their water heater was, and their water heater was leaking. So that's what one of the five plumbers found. Though the five visits, there were actually three different plumbers. So he was like, "Oh, Eureka, we found it." No, you didn't, because I was literally mopping up a bucket of water that smelled like laundry detergent. So I knew, and they kept saying it was mine, but I knew that it wasn't. So I think four or five different plumbers, one leak detection specialist, they all said it was coming from my washer. I literally got my neighbor. This is how you know when you need help, to help me, because my washing machine was old, right? But it wasn't my machine. But I literally had him help me move that machine out, and it was still happening. Long story short, I learned a lot about troubleshooting again, knowing what I know that I know, no matter what these specialists were telling me. So there's a lesson in that as well. But my house was playing and I was responding. And the question that I was starting to ask at the time was, is this setting me up for staying here, for this to be my forever home? Or is it setting me up to move? So that's why I say that's when that move seed first got planted, because I had been in my home for a couple decades at that point. Um, and life continues to move on. So sometimes coming home to yourself means realizing that you might have some desires for yourself that you haven't allowed yourself to explore yet. And survival can become a habit. The interesting thing I think about survival is that eventually you can leave that survival mode, that survival situation. But because it's a pattern, because it's a habit, the body doesn't always get that memo. You may still anticipate problems, you can still overthink, you can still feel responsible for everybody, even when some things have been taken off your plate. You can still feel guilty when you're not being productive. That would be me. Always my thoughts are always with me, right? So wait, why aren't we doing anything? If you always been used to something going on, it can also mean you're still having problems resting. You feel guilty when you're not productive. You keep everything still under control. You stay busy even when it's uncomfortable, right? And you say yes to things that you should probably say no to. And just doing one or two meditations doesn't mean that we're healed now. Like, whoo, I did a meditation. I feel slightly successful, whatever that means. Every meditation is different. But you feel like now you're healed. But all of those other things can still come into play. You have to learn new patterns, and then you have to repeat those new patterns until they start replacing the old patterns. If your nervous system has spent years practicing over functioning, being very vigilant, right? Or constantly responding to demands. It's going to take some practice before everything starts to change. When you think about it, survival is actually a practice that you've been doing for a long time. So, regulation then has to become the practice that replaces it. Rest has to be practiced. Receiving has to become a practice. And that one can be very challenging if you're the one who's used to doing all the giving. Receiving can be very challenging. Boundaries, they also have to be practiced, right? Even joy has to be practiced. And sometimes peace has to be practiced to become familiar. So I think sometimes we get stuck in the healing process. We might think that healing means that I shouldn't feel anything negative anymore. And it's a process and it has to be practiced. So maybe we get frustrated and we still feel anxious. Maybe there are certain things, and I'm sure there will be certain things that will still trigger you. It's not like we're not going to get overwhelmed again or angry and grieving. It takes its own time and it deals with all of us in different ways. And we think when all those things start happening again, that maybe we felt a little relief from for a minute, we think I must not be healed. But healing isn't the absence of those things. Healing is developing a different relationship with how you respond to things and what's going on inside of you. Maybe you used to get triggered and then you would spiral. But now maybe you get triggered and you go, wait, you just notice that, right? Then you breathe. Then you give yourself some space. And then you choose the next step. And that's the recovery. Getting stuck because we keep trying to fix ourselves makes healing or can make healing into another job, right? So now we want to buy another book. We want to listen to another podcast. We want to buy another journal, even though we haven't written in the ones that we already have. We want to try another practice and we want to make it sometimes another thing to accomplish. And so now we get stressed because we're not healing fast enough. Because look, I read the book, I did did all the things, right? And that's real. And that's beginning to seek out those things. So I don't really want to be so down on all those things because sometimes that's just about the process that we have to go through. We're trying to heal ourselves sometimes with the same productivity mindset that keeps us exhausted in the first place. Just know that the body really needs practice, it needs repetition, not perfection. Even if you don't have 60 minutes to practice something, you can start with one conscious breath. You can start by just noticing what's grounding you in the moment, whatever is supporting you, pressing your feet firmly into the earth. You can relax your shoulders, you can relax your jaw, and be conscious about the breath, about the relaxation. Sometimes it's taking a walk. Sometimes it's getting outdoors and let the sun hit your body, hit your face. Sometimes it's stretching, right? Moving. Sometimes it's eating a meal without rushing through it. Sometimes it's going to bed when you're tired and saying, this is enough for today. Tomorrow is a new day. And sometimes it's letting somebody help you. These are small moments where you're teaching your body that you don't have to be on high alert all the time. I'm going to come back to that learning to receive. Many people who have survived for years, they know how to give, but receiving help, sometimes even receiving rest or love, sometimes people don't even know how to receive a compliment. They don't know how to say thank you without saying, oh, but thus and such, right? That's just because, or this day, just say thank you. Sometimes we can't receive care or joy. And sometimes receiving can feel really uncomfortable, especially if we know how to take care of everybody else, but we have somehow neglected taking care of ourselves. So, coming home to yourself means allowing yourself to be cared for, just like you care for other people. So, if we are no longer defined by survival, maybe the next question to just ask yourself is, who am I now? Who am I today? With all the things that have happened in the past, who am I today? Maybe you're creative. Maybe you're playful. I started dancing a lot more just for myself at home during the shutdown because it brings me joy. And the funny thing was is that I could play. I'm the I'm the type of person that if I get a song in my spirit, I like to play it over and over and over again. And I know we all have headsets and stuff, but I was putting it on the speaker, blasting it. And if I had lived with someone else, I'm sure I would have got on their very last nerves. So figure out a way to discover and to not only discover, but act upon your curiosity. Maybe it's time to be playful again. Maybe it's time to be peaceful or rested, or maybe it's time to be bold about something, whatever you're still becoming. And maybe you don't even have to know what that answer is just yet. You can let yourself slowly discover those things. Maybe set aside 15 minutes, maybe journal, maybe do whatever brings you the answer. You can let yourself discover yourself. And that can be a certain type of coming home to yourself. For me, there's a spiritual dimension to coming home to yourself. I believe that there's a difference between the life we build out of fear and maybe the life that we're being invited to live in with more ease. Maybe the question is, what are you showing me about who I am becoming? And then maybe this speaks to the next chapter. Maybe your next chapter isn't about doing more. Maybe it's about becoming available to what the universe, to what God has already placed inside of you. I think this is where discernment comes in. And I think discernment to a certain degree has to be cultivated. And it may take a bit of a trial and error, so to speak, right? Not every desire is going to be a divine assignment. Not every fear has to be a warning necessarily. That's why we need stillness. That's why we need prayer. That's why we need body awareness and time. And then discernment comes. Discernment comes. And then finally, you need trust. And that's trusting yourself, trusting that you know that you know that you know. I thought I was losing it with all of those plumbers coming into my house and a leak detection specialist. And none of them, even though that was their craft, I would consider them experts. But I lived in that house. I was the one mopping up that pail of water that smelled like laundry detergent. Finally, I had to really trust myself and call the association plumber because I didn't want to do that. One, my insurance was paying for somebody else, but if you call the plumber that's connected to your association and it turns out to be your fault, then you got to pay, right? But it just came to a point where I knew that I knew that I knew, and I think I knew before then, but I couldn't just go busting into somebody else's house. They would have to let me in, and they weren't going to do that. But if the association sent the plumber, that plumber was in that house. I thought when he came back and knocked on my door that they weren't home. That's how long it took them to say, yes, their washer is faulty and it has been leaking over. And these were renters, and I was talking to the owner, and the owner had told the people not to run. She knew it, but she told the people not to run the washing machine. Like they weren't going to run the washing machine. Anyway, that was a journey for me. I've been thinking about what those initial seeds that were planted then really look like. I don't think that I was even ready to receive possibly leaving the country at that point. I think there was more I had to see, more I had to learn. Um, so, yeah, I did wind up moving. But now I'm thinking about that next chapter and what that looks like for me. And it's exciting. It's also a little heavy. I know life will change, but I'm still drawn toward that. I know and thinking about the responsibilities of my caretaking and all these unknowns and things that are completely out of my control. But I know that I don't have to figure it all out today. I know that I can just keep moving toward a path, and I have to discern and I have to trust. I know that I can regulate, I can pray, I can listen, and I know that what I don't know will become clear when the time is right. So I want to take us through a short practice, a coming home somatic practice. If it feels good, lower your gaze or close your eyes. Take a really deep breath in, allow your belly and your chest to fill up full. And then as you release that breath, drop your shoulders. If it feels good, you can place a hand on the chest and on the belly. And you can say slowly, I am here. I am safe enough to slow down. I don't have to solve everything today. I can listen to myself. I can trust myself to take the right next step. Take another deep breath in, let it go in whatever way feels good to you. Releasing something else and ask, what do I need today that I haven't been willing to give myself? Deep breath in. If something came up for you, I encourage you to write it down. Sometimes we tend to forget the things that happen, things that we hear in stillness. So take the time to write down whatever came up from you. You can release your hands. One of the things that I love about talking about post traumatic growth is that it reminds us that our story doesn't have to end with what happened to us. It can end or continue by discovering strength and clarity, compassion, maybe new priorities. Maybe it allows us to pivot in a different direction. Maybe we find we have deeper relationships because we're more appreciative, and a different relationship with self, a new purpose. Growth just never, it never erases what happened. It means that what happened isn't the only thing that gets to define what happens next. You don't have to become a completely different person to heal. You may need to simply stop abandoning yourself and abandoning the beautiful person that you already are. Come back to your breath, come back to your body, your values, come back to your faith, your desires, come back to yourself. Perhaps you've spent years being everything to everybody else, and maybe you've allowed that to be your identity. But maybe you're finally in a place, particularly if you found me here today, it's not by accident. Maybe you're finally in a place where you can ask, what do I need? Don't rush the answer, it will come. It's really about the asking. Sit with it, breathe with it, and listen to that still small voice. Because coming home to yourself isn't something that you do just once, it's something that we practice. And maybe it's your season to come home. Like this video, share it, subscribe to my channel. You can also sign up for notifications so you're alerted when the next video comes. And don't forget to remember what you already know. Be well.